Sensor Studio here. I made this fast due to yesterday's big news. Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, made a shocking statement. But that statement was very detailed. He said that if China invades Taiwan, Russia could invade Estonia, a NATO country, at China's request. If this happens, the world could head toward World War III. Let's closely examine this shocking statement and dive right in. In a July 5th New York Times interview, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte made a very shocking statement. He stated that if China decides to use force against Taiwan, Chinese President Xi Jinping might ask Russian President Putin to attack NATO territory in order to divert Europe's attention from the Indo-Pacific situation. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said the likelihood of this scenario is rising and measures to keep China and Russia in check are needed now. He stressed the importance of strengthening NATO's unity and defense to deter Russia from attacking the alliance. He also highlighted the significance of cooperation with Indo-Pacific countries. In fact, this is not the first time that the idea of China and Russia jointly starting a war has been proposed. After Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, there were reports that China tried to invade Taiwan during the calm autumn of that year. This information was revealed when a confidential document from Russia's Federal Security Service was made public by a whistleblower. Fortunately, thanks to Ukraine repelling the Russian attack, China's invasion of Taiwan was thwarted. Recently, such stories have resurfaced. The fact that even the NATO Secretary General mentioned this tells us a lot. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte recently stated that Russia is rebuilding its military power at an unprecedented historical pace by boosting its defense industry. He revealed that Russia has produced 3 times more military supplies in 3 months than all NATO member countries produce in a year. This includes the United States among NATO members, meaning Russia's 3-month production exceeds the combined yearly output of the United States and European NATO nations. It is also said that North Korea sent workers to factories to help produce military supplies. As of 2024, Russia's defense budget has increased by 42% to $462 billion, equivalent to approximately 631 trillion won. With this level of defense spending, it's actually more than the combined defense budgets of all European countries. The European Union's defense budget totals $279 billion, equivalent to 448 trillion. Russia's defense spending exceeds the combined defense budgets of all 27 European Union countries. In other words, Russia's military recovery is happening at a very fast pace. China and Russia are maintaining active contact, having established an unconditional strategic partnership in 2022. As Russia's biggest trade partner, China is reportedly aiding Russia in overcoming Western economic sanctions. The reason Russia was able to avoid tight economic sanctions right away was also because China helped them from the sidelines. The close relationship between Russia and China is growing stronger, leading to what is called a joint war effort between the two countries. Even specific plans were mentioned by Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO. If China invades Taiwan, Russia would invade Estonia. Estonia is a NATO member, but for Russia, attacking Estonia is relatively easier than attacking Ukraine. Its territory is also small. The Estonian military has a standing force of only about 7,200 soldiers, insufficient for a single division. Even with all reservists, it totals around 230,000 people. Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, remarked that Estonia's naval and air forces are severely inadequate. The Russian army's military strength could allow them to easily invade. The problem is, if Russia invades Estonia while China invades Taiwan, the situation becomes much more grave. If Russia invades Estonia, the United States will likely invoke NATO Article 5 and declare war on Russia. If Estonia falls, Finland, Latvia, and Lithuania will also be at risk. However, as the United States cannot abandon Taiwan, it must also focus on the island nation. If this happens, the United States will have to fight on 2 fronts. If wars break out on 2 continents, and since the United States can't give up on either country, it would be a very troublesome situation. China and Russia only have to worry about one direction, but the United States has to fight on 2 fronts at the same time. Consequently, China and Russia could sustain the war more readily than the United States. Of course, if it gets to this point, it would be World War III. The United States definitely wouldn't be able to handle these 2 wars alone. So they might request their allies to send troops. In the case of our country or Japan, we could get drawn into China's invasion of Taiwan. European countries could be deployed to defend Estonia, but this would mean World War III. No further explanation is needed. Almost the entire Western world would have to participate in this war, and China and Russia would also gather their allies for a new confrontation. It's possible to think that NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte intentionally lied to strengthen NATO countries' defense capabilities. However, recent talks have increased about the possibility of Russia attacking a NATO country. NATO's Secretary General and Danish government agencies warn Russia could attack NATO in a few years. Global think tanks also predict China may invade Taiwan by 2027. European countries are also rapidly increasing their defense budgets due to feeling directly threatened recently. The three Baltic states, Poland and Finland, have left the anti-personnel mine ban treaty and are preparing to heavily mine their borders. They are also nearly doubling their defense budgets. It's hard to understand these actions as just random moves without any signals. It appears that Russia and China are planning something together. The crucial question then is, how are NATO and the Western world responding to these threats? Mark Rutte, NATO Secretary General, presented two key response strategies. The first is to strengthen NATO's overwhelming military power. Secretary General Rutte stressed that the priority is to build a NATO strong enough to deter Russia from even considering an attack. This is not mere rhetoric. From 2025 onward, NATO members are rapidly boosting defense spending. Germany, France, Poland, and the United Kingdom in particular are greatly enhancing their advanced weapons and troop deployment capabilities. Poland is currently buying tanks from the United States, largely due to President Trump's strong influence. President Trump has cautioned that the United States may not meet its defense commitments if NATO members fail to allocate a minimum of 2% of their gross domestic product to defense spending. As a result, European nations have consented to raise their defense expenditures by up to 5%. In other words, a drastic American-style measure has been applied to European security. NATO appears to be aiming to bolster its enhanced collaboration with Indo-Pacific allies. Luteo, the NATO Secretary General, called Indo-Pacific nations like Korea, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand strategic partners, stressing the importance of establishing deep cooperation in military, technology, defense, industry, information sharing, and cybersecurity. This strategy is seen not just as an issue of East Asian security, but as something directly connected to NATO's own survival. Also, the United States is getting involved. The United States is working to curb China's growth via military partnerships with Indo-Pacific nations. They are setting a groundbreaking foundation so NATO and Indo-Pacific allies can respond together if Taiwan is invaded. The world is uniting to form a global coalition against China and Russia. If this happens, it could deter war, but if war breaks out, everyone will be dragged into the battlefield, making it all or nothing. In that situation, Korea would play a significant role beyond being just a simple ally. Korea holds a highly strategic geographical position, situated between China and Russia. Amid North Korea's instability, Korea is the sole democracy that can act as a forward base to counter China and Russia. If China invades Taiwan and Russia attacks NATO, the West will likely ask Korea to share security responsibilities on both fronts. Korea could become the key supply line for Taiwan's defense and serve as a United States logistics base. If targeted by North Korea and China, the Korean peninsula could face the risk of becoming a second front. That's how important Korea's diplomatic power is becoming at this moment. If the situation worsens significantly, Korea must assume an unparalleled level of responsibility and leadership. But there are also people who say, can't we just declare ourselves a neutral country? But as long as the United States forces Korea are here, it's uncertain whether China would just leave those United States military bases alone. Just looking at the Iran-Israel war, we can already imagine what kind of attitude China would show. Something very shocking was mentioned. It's not an exaggeration to say that the whole world is basically a powder keg. A small spark in Taiwan or the Baltic states could become the beginning of World War III. It's not an exaggeration to say that if China moves, Russia will follow. Ideally, war should be avoided altogether. What would be the consequences if China and Russia waged war together? Share your thoughts in the comments. That's all for this video. Thank you.